So hello, welcome to week 7, the final week of the program, or of this course. And now is when we're going to get to bring it all together. So everything that we've done so far has been, in pieces, in chunks. And now we get to say, okay, what do we do with all this information and how can we bring it to a presentation that will make sense to any executive or client, or that you could use in your own business to propose an event or an event series or journey, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're just going to cover a couple new concepts. I know we've got the final and the final presentation. You will have some choices there. I'll describe that at the end, which hopefully will make it easier to think about, or you can always use one of the templates, one of the ones provided from the last class, if that makes it more straightforward. So there's a couple different ways that you can approach that final presentation. But without any further ado, we will go into screen share and start to talk about this week's topics. So we have event journeys and cost benefit analysis. And within that cost benefit analysis, I'm going to sneak in one more item, which is using labor costs to your benefit. I'll describe what I mean in a moment. This isn't going to be for everyone. That's why I just put a little asterisk at the bottom in case you're internal. And if you're looking for more justification for more headcount, it's just another way you could use potentially cost benefit analysis or financial models to help alleviate the load or add more to your staff count. So this is going to be all about planning multiple series and events. Part of the reason we're doing that is because, of course, that's how companies think. And then looking at cost benefit analysis as yet one more way to showcase or make a case for our ideas. So multi-year programs, year-round programs. As we know, events are only one tool or one moment and touch point that any company uses, again, whether you're a third party, whether you're internal, to work with their customers, to approach their customers, approach their users. There's multi touch points. Events are just one, but there can be many of them. So even if you only did, let's say, an annual event for a company, there are multiple touch points happening within that company to those exact users, donors, association members, whatever your constituents are, be that newsletters, emails, maybe one-on-one calls, appointments. On top of that, events can play a bigger role. And I think especially because of COVID, it was a benefit in one way. Of course, there were lots of negatives. Don't worry, we're aware of that. But the benefit of COVID, I think, is that it really shone a bright light on how to use virtual events or additional touch points outside of a live synchronous event that could bring more audiences to the table and could keep them engaged for longer, and that they might not have to be giving you attention at that exact moment in order to be a part of your event campaign, event journey, engagement map, whatever it is that you call it. But virtual really augmented that, which was fantastic. And so that led into us thinking even more, and companies thinking more into year-round multi-year programs and events being a part of that. So we don't have any more what I call cliffhanger events where you go up a cliff. It's a lot of planning. We work with a lot of companies who used to do it this way. We were trying to get them out of it, that would work all the way up and then, oh, it's over. Everybody takes weeks off. They don't think about it again for another couple months until they do that again. So the best part about virtual as well is it really gave us the ability to segment audiences more. And I know we talked about that in personas, because now you can really start to pinpoint who are these audiences? How do we reach them? What's their behavior online? What's their behavior on site? How can we craft our in-person event to either be a hybrid experience for them, a live plus, or how do we craft something that just fits how they want to engage with our company, with our organization, with our foundation, our nonprofit, whatever it is, our membership. And to me, that blend into us really looking as event professionals even more. Some of you might have been doing this, but I think there's a lot that weren't in the industry. It's blended a lot more with marketing, and it's really increased the value of even in-person events. That to me was a halo benefit, is now people are even more excited to go to in-person events. They're crafted more specifically for them. People are anxious to get out there. And now you can make it even more exclusive. You could make it the culmination of a series of virtual events or touch points, but it's almost building even more anticipation for those live events. So how can we leverage this? Start to think like marketers and start to promote to our companies and to our clients that this is how we think, because that can be really valuable. I mean, if you look at some of the salary data, marketers make a lot of money, and sometimes, not always, but in companies, you can see the marketing department outpace sometimes the events department. So it's a benefit to think like marketers. And that's where I started my career, was in marketing first. Then it was film, then marketing, then I came to events. So that was my original approach when I thought about events. So this that you're looking at right here is, you can call it either an event journey. Sometimes people call them event campaigns, like marketing campaigns. But this is what we do for our clients at Caspian. And I think it's a really useful look at how we're seeing companies are finally starting to really embrace. A lot of them had been there, but thinking about long-term engagement with different audience types using different type of events, virtual, synchronous, asynchronous recordings to really move the metrics and move their goals. So on this particular one, we had a survey, we did one-on-one calls, we had academics get together with the private sector, and then we had videos that we sent out to them, and then a broadcast, which was a virtual show, but much more like a broadcast TV show with an anchor, etc., kind of culminating from this journey. And then, as you can see, the little dot in October, then they were going to take out some actions from that broadcast, kind of capturing of new audiences, and start to do some work with them. So this is one. Very plain, not very pretty. And when you see the assignment about doing a presentation and creating an event journey, you could do it as simple as this. You'll see some examples from the last class. You don't have to be a graphic designer. We have one in-house. She makes these look a lot prettier than I do. But even if you just put, boxes and circles on a timeline, that's enough. This is not a graphic design class by any stretch of the imagination. It's a little prettier, again, still probably not where it needs to be, but this is called an engagement roadmap. You can call it that as well, and maybe you plot some of the things that your company does or your clients do. Maybe they send out newsletters, maybe they do other things that you can involve in an engagement roadmap. And you can see we had a note for what was synchronous and what was asynchronous. So that, actually, I'm going to pause on that last one. So this is really, the culmination of the class is to think about a financial model that has multiple events over time, because that's going to be the most useful application of a financial model, or to show multiple scenarios of the same event, which I know some of you have been working on, actually, and that fits what your needs are better. So you could alter the presentation and the assignment to fit that. If you don't have multiple events over time, but instead you have one event and you want to see how is this going to develop, maybe your roadmap and journey might show 3 different outcomes. One is, I think there's still some marketing that has to take place, but maybe you say we're going to market at this, and in this one scenario, we get all the personas we want. In the second one, we might not hit everybody. Maybe in the third scenario, we really knock it out of the park. That's another way of looking at this. An engagement roadmap is just showing what might happen over time to a certain audience or to your goal as you're looking at a time frame, which is helpful because most businesses don't want to just start and stop in a 3-day period with an event. There's a lot happening before, a lot happening after, including events. So that is a part of this week's assignment, is to create an event journey just like that. And you'll see it written out more clearly in the assignment, but at least 3 different events that are happening over some amount of time. And you can base your financial model on the largest one, if that's the biggest one that's maybe building in revenue or that's costing the most, because I know some of you don't have revenue generating events, but you do have events that cost money. So even if you're showing that investment over time, that's helpful. Within this time, we're going to invest this much, but there has to be some value coming out of it, or the organization wouldn't be doing it. Cost benefit analysis. It's very similar, and you could say that the value presentation I did the very beginning, the bread PowerPoint, was in a sense a cost benefit analysis, because you could see value linking to cost. If you paid this much, you get this value. And in a sense, if you look at your presentation and you want to put it into this format, which you'll see a little video about it in today's videos, or this module's videos, that is fine too. Some companies speak this language more than, let's say, value propositions. The reason I like to start with value-based selling is because, at least in what I do in my experience, I have found getting people to move into a value mindset means that I've already gotten them over the hump of accepting that this value is what they want, that this value is worth going after. Now I just have to prove to them in the rest of my presentation, what is it going to take to do it? What are the risks to do it, etc. But the value is there, and I need agreement on that value. So that's why I use that value bread PowerPoint at the beginning. But it's also a very useful tool to know about, is a cost benefit analysis, especially as you're looking at financial models and proving that an event might be worthy. So what is it? It's just a systematic approach. Evaluate strengths and weaknesses of alternatives, which one you might want to do to achieve the benefits while not costing too much. You're preserving savings. I know you've probably all done SWOT analysis so far, so you know these basic kind of models that are really set up just to help people make decisions. I mean, you do a cost benefit analysis, I'm sure, all the time when you decide, should you buy a new car? Should you take a master's class? Should you take a new job? Should you move? There's a lot of cost benefit analysis we do almost without thinking. So, but with regards to events, what we want to think of in looking at a cost benefit analysis is, what are we giving up? Or what is an executive giving up, or a business that decides to buy into our idea, or an investor? For some of you who want to create ideas that might get an investor or a funder attracted, what are they going to give up? So if you're in a company, which is how I'll describe this here, a company would be giving up labor. There is a true labor trade-off to give up once you start to focus on one event and not another, or one activity and not another. Percentage of staff time is what you start to put into an event, and I'm going to talk about how we can use that. And focused attention on other business areas. Maybe there's another area of the business that we were going to, start another initiative, or we're going to launch in more countries. And it's going to be an either or. It's going to detract from that. So we need to know what else a business is trying to wrestle with and manage. And there's a great article in the articles section this week that will really talk about how you have to know the agendas of your various departments that you're pitching. And that goes for third party as well. We have to know what they're balancing, where their attention is, and what might move their attention off of something if they went with our concept. And yeah, any programs or initiatives that they might be launching could be something they give up if they go with our idea. Now, with regards to labor, whenever a company decides we're going to go this way and not that way, they're dedicating labor towards it. And the reason I like to talk about this is because I know, at least in every kind of trend in our industry, shows that, we're usually overworked and understaffed. Not always. There's a few companies, I think, that do staff well, but the majority of the time, the events department can be operating pretty lean. And adding in labor costs. And so actually, I think there were a couple of you that had on your initial financial survey that your company does track that. So there are a couple companies that track it. It's not all. But if yours doesn't, and like I said, this is specifically for you in-house folks, it may be worth adding a labor line item to all of your events. The reason why is because it could make an argument for you to add more headcount and get more help, especially when it's compared to the value and the benefits of what a company is going to get if they just added another person. So the way you calculate labor costs, a couple different ways you can do it. There's no, you have to do it one way, but a simple way is you take the salary of each person working on the event. It could be just the event department, but we know, these annual events sometimes take the entire company. But let's say we just use your event department. You take everyone's salaries, you do a rough estimate of how much time is spent on this particular event, and you just put that line item in for internal labor into the cost of your event. Now, another way you could do it, and then I'll tell you how you could leverage this, is you could just take the entire cost of the event department and just do a percentage that you take. Let's say the whole event department is $500,000 in salaries, and maybe for your large event you do 30% of that 500,000, and for your smaller events you maybe do 10% of the 500,000, and that's how you spread that 500,000 across your entire event slate. Totally possible. The reason why I like doing this is because most departments, most companies have a multiplier that they're thinking of that each department has to generate as far as value. When I've done this experiment with a lot of internal events departments teams, we find the value they generate is vastly higher per person than any other department in the company, and it's usually not even close. Now, sometimes sales gives a run for the money, but from the value that is gained by the activities of usually a very small group of people, if that value is 5 million and your department is operating on, 100,000, it starts to look really imbalanced and like you need more people hired. So that is an interesting way that you can use this little labor idea. Otherwise, if you don't need to argue for more headcount, that's just a little tool. It is more accurate for events to put in some labor cost if you do have an event department, because you don't work for free and you want to be able to show that this is a value, a massive value based on internal salaries, internal work product. That comparison is extremely compelling for any executive, and it's not done at very many companies. When it is, things can change for the better. Also, the reason I like to bring up labor is because now, coming full circle, no such thing as break even. Nobody works for free. The minute you start working on an event, it's an investment. So unless labor is counted, that's why I've put gross profit on everything we've been doing. Gross, not net. Because if you start to go to net, you usually have to take out a lot of other costs. I mean, labor is just one. You could make an argument that taxes need to be taken out of there, depreciation, all of that. Gets really complicated. The EBITDA that Rich was talking about, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. But it's not break even when your labor is there, and everything is fairly, I would say, gross profit until you really get down to the nitty gritty. So that's why I keep that in all our financial models. We don't ever want to be called on the carpet that we're saying something is net when it's actually not. Let's see here. The other interesting thing about cost benefit analysis that you can use as a tool or just as something to be aware of is a cost benefit analysis. Weighing the costs and the benefits can also be influenced by timeline, because just like if you're making a decision to take a job, there's a time pressure on that. So your cost benefit analysis is influenced by what's the benefit of me making the decision right now to take this job or wait for a better one. And it's the same with making decisions on any piece of an event. So it's related to go, no go decisions. And you can add that, not for this class, you don't have to, it's just good to keep in mind that a go, no go decision may be an implication of setting up the cost benefit analysis and saying, here's the cost, here's the benefit if we do it. And if we don't decide by this time, we won't even have a chance to do it. So we really need to weigh, is this really beneficial or is it not by this date? That happens a lot with choosing venues and hotels. The deadline is there. If we don't choose to move, our cost benefit analysis is moot. It will be taken away from us. That also gets into the concept, which you'll read about in one of the articles. It touches briefly on it. Some of you probably already know the term sunk costs. But, again, just like when you start working on events, some of your sunk costs are already in labor. The other, great example of sunk costs is the minute you buy insurance. It's not like you get a refund on your car insurance every year if you don't use it. I wish that were true, but that's a sunk cost. So there's a lot of sunk costs that are attached to the timeline as well. We've used this to help clients make decisions. Hey, you're going to have more sunk costs in January when we have to pay all these new deposits than in December. In December, your sunk costs are only going to be $100,000. By January, your sunk costs are going to be $500,000. So you have an incentive. There's a massive cost coming if you do not make a decision in December. You get a benefit of saving, $400,000 if you make a decision there. Other reason this is important is with pivots, not just COVID, but pivots in general. There could be a hurricane. There could be, something happening in a country where there's political instability. So being able to pivot, saying the cost benefit analysis, deciding now to pivot might save us money. So this comes up a lot when we were discussing, I'm sure all you were too, COVID. Is it better to decide now or not? And we were actually doing a lot of cost benefit analyses for our clients to say, is it better to make a decision now that you're not going to go at all and do this overseas event, or is it better to wait? And there was a lot of optics involved in our cost benefit analysis for them. That does it look worse if they wait, or worse if their attendees start to commit to travel costs and it looks like they're irresponsible. So cost benefit analysis has a link to go, no go decisions. There are no questions about this particular concept on the final or anything else. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of this as a linkage for your internal or external clients or for your own business. It's always good to know. I have to know these for my own business. When are sunk costs a time where I need to move, or how many, what's my sunk cost rate going to be by X date? And is there a benefit to making a hard decision earlier? So putting all of this together, this I hope is the fun part. I really hope it is. For a lot of you, you put so much work into your financial models. They are gorgeous right now. So what we get to do is just benefit from that model now and put it into concepts. Now we're going to sell all the work you've done. And if you see in the assignment this week, what it is there's a lot more points for the presentation than for the financial model. Why? Because the financial model is about building it and having discipline and knowing how to get the information out of it that you want. But really the benefit of a financial model is that you can go in just like a pantry and pluck out what you need to then present it. It's always there. You can show people the pantry if they really need to see it, but really you are now creating, the dish. You're making the gorgeous dish that you're showing. If anyone really wants to see the ingredients, they can go to your financial model. So what did we learn in review? We started out talking about value-based selling. I just brought it up a bit. It links to cost-benefit analysis. But how do we get to the value of an event? We went right away and threw away the idea of budget. We were like, a budget, a single one-off budget is great for certain things. But when we want to get to that executive office, when we want to think like an executive and a CEO, when we want to chart our own course in our businesses, This is where we need to stay in value conversations. The minute we digress to budgets, we're going right back. We want to go higher, and we want to talk about value and key performance indicators. Then that leads right to, well, then we need a financial model to do that. We need to be able to see what are the values of different options. How do we do what ifs? How do we say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? How do we live in that mindset? And in a financial model, we talked about an executive summary, keeping it high level. Those first 3 tabs, we do not want them going into our line items and looking at how much we spend on linens. That's why I never looked at what numbers you put in for linens. You could have put $500 a linen for all I care. The idea was to build a model. Of course, you have to make it accurate when you really do this. But how do you get this thing to flow together? And how do you stay in those first 3 tabs? Executive summary, your keys. I make them revenue and attendance. That's the way I do it. And then you're getting those projections that you can start to work with. So we talked about keys, an anchor formula, that $ letter, $ number, so that once we change one thing, everything else changes with it. We talked about revenue streams. How do you create them, from sponsorship to membership to subscriptions? How do you see revenue? One person in one of my last classes had a phenomenal idea around creating ticket attendee or ticket cancellation insurance for events. If you listen to the cryptocurrency video, you heard us talking about what if we could create, in a sense, shareholders for an event, which you could do with cryptocurrency or coins, crypto coins. So just really playing around with the idea of revenue streams. And then, of course, we looked at our fixed and variable costs, specifically how we always want to make sure that our variable costs are linking to our revenue. If every time we sell a ticket, every time we do something to create value over here, it probably costs us on one of our tabs. If we're creating a VIP program, I bet there's, if they're going to a dinner, well, then that attendance has to link to, then we buy another meal every time. So making sure we link those. We talked about audience personas, the fact that it's based on psychographics, behavior, never on demographics. We don't want to know their age, their sex, their gender. We don't want to know where the regions they're from. We only want to know their behavior. And that also led to that video on tribes, which I think a lot of you liked, from Seth Godin, creating a community. And that is shared interests and shared experiences. Again, trying to eliminate demographics because they might lead us astray with unconscious biases. Risks and mitigation. Every single one of our financial models has to account for the fact that we cannot predict the future. So how do we mitigate? How do we provide contingencies? And how do we insure? Or how do we accept? Which of course is something we can also acknowledge. Visuals, and I put in trend lines. I know that's a visual, but the idea of creating bar graphs and pie charts, but also that fascinating video around data visualization, doing mountains to represent something, or bigger bubbles to represent things that are trending. So a lot of ways of doing visuals. But then I will call trend lines out specifically because they are so useful when showing how an event, revenue, expenses, audiences, whatever you want to show, changes over time. That is a big one. I do not know any executive that does not want to see how something changes over time, because we all want things to trend up in some way, shape, or form. Market size, we talked about the different ways you can talk about addressable market size, total, obtainable, serviceable, but what's our chances of, even if we got everybody in the market, what's that market worth? Coca-Cola cannot exceed soda drinkers. If people drink pop and there's only 1 billion of them, well, 1 billion is actually where they top out. So what is your market size? And then we just covered cost benefit. Sunk costs, go, no go, and thinking about labor costs, either to make it a more true cost of your event or to help you get headcount if you would like to do that. So that is a summary of what we're doing. I want to thank you. This has been a joy to teach again, and I've learned. I hope you've learned. I'm sure there's definitely things that I take from every class that I'll be incorporating in the next one. But I do hope that this has helped in some way, shape, or form transform your thinking around financials, transform your thinking around your possibilities of creating revenue stream or value, and maybe transform your thinking about creating something from scratch, either in your company, for your business, or moving forward. So this week, you are going to be able to put together this presentation with your ideas. Like I said, you can either follow that trend line or the examples that are provided, or you can do your own and just use a couple of concepts from this class. But I do hope this has been valuable for you. I do think that when you own numbers, when you own money, whether it's in your own life or anywhere else, that you can write your own ticket in your career and in your life. So I hope that is what you find too. Hope to see you at one of the last office hours. I think we have 2 more to go, and I'll see you then.